Did you know that when Robin Williams passed away, he did such a good job of planning, he was able to avoid many of the problems, inheritance and estate battles that plague a lot of celebrities and wealthy estates. So today we're going to talk about his situation and what he did right to help make it an easy transition for his family. Hey, Janice.
Hi, Anthony. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well.
So let's talk about Robin Williams. We'll start by talking about his background, his family situation, and what he did in terms of planning, and then we'll talk about how it all shook out. How does that sound?
Absolutely.
All right. Can you start us off by telling us a little bit about his family?
So he was survived by his third spouse. He had 3 adult kids from prior marriages, if I'm not mistaken. He's been definitely divorced a few times, been through the divorce process, which he had a lot to say about. We'll talk about that. But
so before we go forward, he had a blended family, yes, meaning he had a third spouse, I believe, and adult kids from prior relationships. So those kids, just in case anyone's not familiar, those kids kind of don't have any direct relationship with Robin Williams' last spouse, right? So there's the potential for friction there, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Cool. All right.
As there is with any blended family, and then you add this into the mix, and it does get complicated.
So we know that Robin Williams was no stranger to legal battles and legal costs. Let's talk a little bit about some of his history in the courtroom and why he was just kind of keenly aware that you want to avoid the courts and conflicts when possible.
Yeah. So it's noted that he spent over $20 million on divorces alone. I don't know how that's comprised, whether that was legal fees or what he had to pay, but that's a pretty astronomical amount. $20 million. Could you imagine spending that on anything?
Okay, so I looked up a few of his, he's a comedian first and foremost before he became like this huge movie star. And he had a couple of funny quotes regarding divorce. The one I came across was, what's the difference between a tornado and a divorce in the South? Answer? Nothing, because someone's losing a trailer. All right.
I found this one. This one was good.
All
Divorce is expensive. I used to joke they were going to call it all the money, but they changed it to alimony.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal. Everything he did was great. Going back to his, world of comedy, Mork and Mindy. Did you watch that show?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, I grew up watching almost every episode of that show, the Mork and Mindy's, and then we graduated to Mrs. Doubtfire. So he was like in our lives when we were growing up. So it's interesting to hear him talk about now divorce.
Yeah. You don't think about those kind of things when somebody is known for just laughs and jokes and whatnot. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it wasn't just his divorces where he had legal battles. In the 80s, he was also sued by a former lover for $6.2 million, which is a huge amount. In present day dollars, that might be probably well over $15 million.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that was in the 80s. So.
Yeah, and I don't know what that was for. We didn't dig too deep into that, but just he did have to settle that for an undisclosed amount. But that's just another example of he knows the courts and conflicts can cost, yeah? Yes,
correct. I don't know much about it, just know that 6.2, even if he settled for somewhere around there, in the 80s, it's a huge amount.
And then lastly, he had a bit of a legal battle with Disney over his very famous and very popular role as the genie in Aladdin. Apparently, it was some sort of conflict over what rights Disney had about using his voice for promotions and marketing beyond the scope of the movie itself. And luckily, luckily for Robin Williams, he didn't wage an all-out battle with Disney. That probably would have cost everyone a lot of money. But instead, they ended up just walking away amicably, and he actually was able to get a supposedly sincere apology from Disney as an entity, which is supposedly really rare. They apparently don't do very many mea culpas, so he did get that at least. Yeah.
Well, I don't think many people do apologies. Could you imagine where the legal world would be if someone would just say, you know what, I'm sorry, that we were wrong, but he managed to skate out of that with, don't know what it cost in general, but did you see Aladdin? I mean, we watched that a million times when my kids were little. He was, again, phenomenal.
I've never watched Aladdin.
Oh, I would highly. Okay. So your homework is to watch Aladdin. It is phenomenal. He is in that role is hysterical, and it's an animated character. Phenomenal.
Not to go off on a tangent, but did you see the Will Smith version of Aladdin that's coming out soon?
Yes, I cannot wait. Again, because I grew up, my children would watch Aladdin like all the time, on repeat, all the time. So now I am excited to see the real version, which looks pretty cool.
He looks like a huge Smurf. I don't know. It looks a little weird to me.
Well, it's probably hard to make the genie up in a real life format when he's a character. Character. Yeah, but
character. Yeah. Cool. So let's talk now. Okay, so now we know about Robin Williams' family a little bit and his sort of his background and history with legal battles. So he knows that it costs a lot if you don't, so you want to avoid them. So let's talk about what he did to set things up properly for his family. Okay. So first, shortly after his third and I guess final marriage in 2011 to Susan, they signed a prenup. That just seems to be generally good advice, especially in California, which is a community property state.
Okay.
Just for anyone who doesn't know what a prenup is, it's short for a prenuptial agreement, and it's a contract that spells out each spouse's rights to each other's assets for the most part. I mean, I guess it covers other stuff too, like child custody, but let's talk about the money here. There's a lot of rules that people don't know about on the surface, such as specific rights to retirement accounts or something called spousal election. There's a lot of rules that you want to make sure you understand and make sure you're okay with that being how it shakes out after you pass away. So you're basically, when you do a prenuptial agreement, you're contracting out of or making your own customized version of all these default rules. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And he was worth probably quite a bit of money too. So you have to factor that in with when you're talking about divorce and estates. You have to figure out what happens to that.
And especially having a blended, so obviously very wealthy, and having a blended family. There's just not as many, even with full, what I guess you could call nuclear families, there's going to be problems. But that might be even more compounded when you have a surviving spouse who's not the biological parent of the surviving kids, right? There's not that connection,
right?
That connective
it's
tissue.
It's complicated. You have, you have more moving parts. You have more people. It just gets a little bit more complicated.
So that was step one of what Robin Williams did very well. Good for him. Number two, he, let's see, shortly after that, in 2012, the year after, he updated his estate plan. And people, this is huge. And let me explain why. A lot of people go to their attorney, sit down and do their estate plan, and they check that box and they think, awesome, pat myself on the back. I did a good job. It's done.
Well done. Yeah.
It's not all done. I mean, it's done for maybe the next 4 years or so, but then you need to keep checking it. You need to keep updating. The reason for that is your assets change, laws change, family situations change. Maybe the person you named as the executor is now not the right fit. Maybe the person you thought would be the guardian of the kids, you're realizing for whatever reason is not the right person you want raising your children.
Right.
Or maybe you just have a sudden increases in wealth. I mean, that'd be great, right?
That'd be really great. Yeah.
So there's
call you. Hey, guess what?
So there's so many reasons why you really need to at least take a look. You don't necessarily have to update every 4 years, but you really should take a look every 4 years. And as I like to say, take a look with every presidential cycle or every Olympics, or the World Cup, something that you remember very easily. Team USA didn't make the round of 64. Yeah. Better check my will. Something like that.
Right. Just something little. Yeah. You called it the Olympics of the estate plan.
So the reason this is huge for Robin Williams is because he'd signed that prenup, right? So you want to make sure that your existing estate plan, whether it's a will or a trust, I believe his was a trust, is consistent with whatever changes and adjustments you made when you did the prenup, right? If not, then either one or both is not going to work out the way you wanted it to, right?
Do you know specific, which would supersede, or would they just be in conflict with each other?
Well, they could just be in conflict.
That doesn't match. Okay.
Well, so if he had a prenup that said, we don't. Well, so here's what's probably relevant. Surviving spouses have certain rights, like the right to not be completely disinherited or the right to get at least 1/3 of the estate. Those are two, for example, rights in the state of New York. So the prenup in this context would be important because it would say, I give up that right. The surviving spouse, in this case Susan, probably said, I give up my right to automatically get at least 1/3 of the estate. That's what I'm, contracting out of.
Okay.
So that Robin Williams can then write a will, which he did, and we'll get into that in a moment, that gives the vast majority of his estate to his kids, not his third wife. And she can't just say, hey, wait, I have a legal right to 1/3 because she contracted out of that right. Okay.
Right. Okay.
All right. So that's what he did right, prenup and updating his estate plan. So let's talk about how it all shook out. Surprise. Shortly after Robin Williams passed away, Susan sued to get more. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So, without getting into the nitty-gritty details, the wills or Robin Williams' estate plan basically said Susan can live in the house, the mansion, I assume. I mean, he's Robin Williams, right?
I would imagine. Right.
And she also was entitled to some of his personal mementos or heirlooms, some of which could be quite valuable. Imagine getting the Mork and Mindy suspenders, like the originals, or something like that, right?
That would be so cool. But,
right.
But I'm saying it all has value. Everything
Sure.
that he has is some sort of value. Yes.
But everything else went to the kids, and upon her passing and giving up her residence of the house, that would also go to the kids. That was what Robin Williams' estate plan was. I guess Susan didn't think that was quite right, or maybe I think there was also some conflict over to which heirlooms were included and which she could take. So that was the nature of the conflict. But because Williams did such a great job, he had a prenup, he had an updated estate plan, there really wasn't a whole lot to argue about. And it settled relatively quickly. So, there wasn't this drawn out, years long, hundreds of thousands of dollars legal battle that would kind of forever tear the family apart. And as far as I can tell, his surviving spouse and his surviving children don't seem to have that kind of, I don't know them, but they don't seem to have that kind of.
You're just kind of hoping that they don't have that conflict. But so he must have had a really good estate planning and an attorney or whoever he used that told him you should make it all cohesive and make it match, right? So there isn't a conflict after, which led to this relatively quick legal battle.
Yeah. So, this is a good example of why it's important to know how things will shake out in the end when you're doing your planning, so that you kind of know, like, okay, I'm writing this clause into my will or my prenup or my trust. What does that mean? Like, what actually happens after I die, so that I can see what this clause actually translates into action upon my death. And as you know, we just dropped our book, How Probate Works.
Vanna White. I got my advanced reader's copy, which I actually have thoroughly enjoyed. I have worked on this with you for years.
Yeah.
But it does have really good reference information of oh, that's right. It's a very good one-stop shopping is what I say, to just give you a little bit of background on a complicated subject.
So I did my best to include lots and lots of examples just to make sure that you, the reader, can understand, okay, theoretically I understand what it means to avoid probate or to have to pay creditors, but here's what it really means. Here's an example, so that you can kind of, visualize it a little better. That's all. Yeah.
It's a real world, layman's terms with examples, I think is a good way to put it.
Very good.
It just breaks it down and makes it easy. A complicated process makes it easy, if that's even a thing.
Yeah, very good. So that's available on Amazon. Pick it up. Also, so I think that's all we have today. Is that right, Janice?
Absolutely. Please watch Aladdin. Report back. You will not regret it. He was phenomenal. His passing was so terribly tragic and sad, but he did a really good thing with how he set this up.
Yep, he did a great job. So that's the lesson of today. Be more like Robin Williams and less like, let me think of an example. I think Tony Soprano died without a will. I don't remember off the top of my head, but just to give you a celebrity example.
We've talked about a few. Yeah, it's been complicated after death. So he did good.
All right. That's all I have today. Thank you, Janice, and talk to you again next time.
We'll talk soon.
Bye now.